As Dan talked about all the American weapons, we're going to talk a little bit about the weapons that the American soldier was up against in the Second World War. The Germans were usually trendsetters when it came to weaponry. Their quality was unsurpassed. Their technology was ahead of the game in most cases. It's kind of funny how the German soldier went to war with basically the same kind of rifle that he used in World War I, which was the MAUSER K98K bolt-action rifle. It was a 5-round, clip-fed weapon, just like the 03. Basically, all the Germans did was shorten the barrel a little bit to a little more manageable length, but it was the same technology it was in 1898. The only thing that they did during the war later on is that they started to cut down on some of the labor and machining process so they could produce the weapons a little cheaper and a little more efficiently. That's an early weapon. Although this one looks almost identical, the bands in the front now are made out of stampings. All right, the Germans were trendsetters again with coming up with weaponry out of stamped steel instead of machined steel. They can make it strong, yet they could make it cheaper. So the finishing touches are not as nice. There's weld seams and so on and so forth, but the rifle could still shoot you just as dead as one that was made in 1937. The last ditch version was known as a Krieg's model. Again, it's very similar, but the machining techniques were cruder. The stocks weren't as nicely finished. In some cases, they weren't even stained. And if you look on the front of this one doesn't even have a bayonet lug. They removed that altogether because they really didn't fight with bayonets in World War II. You know, they were probably opening up cans of food with their bayonets as opposed to trying to stick somebody with it. But again, cheaper but still effective. The one that's over here is another 98K. However, on the front of this one is a grenade launcher. We're going to demonstrate the U.S. grenade launcher later, but this was a cup discharger which was rifled on the inside, and this is a anti-personnel round which fitted into this. Basically went down there and it fired with a blank cartridge just like the GI one. And it would throw this pretty far. It had an adjustable sight for setting your range. It had a bubble level on it, so you could be pretty accurate with it. You could fire this thing maybe up to 175 to 200 yards with this thing. Usually every squad had one. The Germans slowly became realists in the firepower. It's kind of funny that the Germans, who at the time in 1944 and 43 were starting to develop jet airplanes and ballistic missiles to hit England, were still equipping their men with bolt-action rifles right through 1945, and that most of their infantry divisions had all their gear being pulled by horses. Pretty amazing. So you got ballistic missiles and horses pulling your stuff, so really kind of an odd balance. Needless to say, they were impressed by two weapons. One was the Russian SVT-40, which was a Russian semi-automatic rifle. It had a 10-round magazine and it could fire very fast. It was reliable, and the Germans picked them up on the Russian front and used them whenever they could. The other one, which was much better, was the M1 Garand. The M1 rifle, as Dan said, was a magnificent piece of weaponry, and the Germans saw the technology and they did their version. Their version of it was called the G43. The G43, again, used cruder techniques, castings, stampings, all right? And unfortunately for the Germans, a lot of their weaponry was also made with slave labor who weren't exactly motivated to do a good job. So a lot of times they would sabotage the weapons or throw the tolerances off a little bit, and the guy in the field would have some problems, and that's just too bad for him, all right? So this was a semi-automatic version. It held 10 rounds in the magazine, and I guess we'll want to fire the Mauser first. I'm getting way ahead of myself here.
Yeah, or fire them one after the other.
Right.
You want to do it.
All right. Well, let me go over here a little bit. Pistol-wise, the Germans carried the famous LUGER pistol. It was a 9mm round. Okay. It was fast, but it didn't pack a lot of weight like a 45. All right. But it was still a prized weapon for every souvenir hunter in the American Army. Everyone wanted to bring home a LUGER, right? So, did you bring home a LUGER?
No.
Ah, too bad.
I wasn't lucky enough.
You're right. You brought your cell phone. That was good enough, right? All right. But this was a prized weapon. This was made in 1908, and they were using it through the end of the war. Like the Thompson submachine gun, it required a tremendous amount of machining and tool work in order to make this. It was a quality gun. I'll give you an idea. We'll see how this functions. Did you set that way for now?
Good idea.
Fire in the hole.
You heard that going?
Because of the cost, the Germans decided, even before the war, to come up with a better gun. That gun was the P-38 made by Walther. All right, still a company making pistols today. This was the first double-action semi-automatic pistol in the world, which means that you can cock it and have a lighter trigger squeeze, or you can pull it with the trigger. Same thing, one way or the other. The 45 was a single action, so you had to cock the hammer for the first round, and then it would cock every time the slide would go back. This was a very innovative gun, fired the same round, and this eventually surpassed the LUGER as far as issue to the troops. Fire in the hole.
Cool echo. Is that how they? Is that what they did?
Yeah. It might even be a little louder.
And then kaboom. Or kaboom.
Like I said, the Mauser was only 5 rounds. The M1 had 8 fired semi-automatically. The Mauser had 5. So he had to move that ball back and forth for every round. Fire in the hole.
That's the problem. Didn't we stand over there when they were doing the Civil War reenactment? Go, Bill. Get ready.
This is the G43. They're hot, don't touch them yet. They're red hot. I also noticed that had a telescopic sight on it. Even though that gun was stamped and made late in the war, they put telescopic sights. There's a sniper rifle over there made on a Mauser, and they tried to get as many, since they were under defense most of the time, they tried to get as many accurate weapons as they could. Yes?
Is that thing over there the German Panzerfaust?
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know some stuff about that.
All right. Anybody know what this is?
MP40.
It's an MP40, probably the most recognized German gun of World War II. Normally issued to paratroopers, squad leaders, anybody that could really get their hands on them. It fired a 9mm round, which, again, all submachine guns fired a pistol round. So it was a small bullet, 32-round magazine. Fired about 500 to 550 rounds a minute. Fire in the hole.
Guess that's the machine gun.
The last weapon, or is it getting hot? The last weapon is known as the MP44. It was also known later on, where they basically made a few minor changes. They called it an STG-40, which stood for Sturmgewehr, which is the grandfather of the assault rifle. If you look at an AK-47, has some similarities. Although the Russians will swear up and down they thought of it all, I think that's a bunch of BS. I think they captured a bunch of these and used a lot of the technology to make one of the finest weapons to follow World War II. This weapon, if you look at it, is made totally of stampings, just with a wooden buttstock. The thing that made this the difference between an assault rifle and a submachine gun is that this fired a rifle round. The small pistol cartridges didn't have the distance and the knockdown power. So what the Germans did, which was very innovative, they made an 8mm short of their normal round. So it was just as powerful with knockdown power and had a lot more range. Fired both semi-automatically and fully automatically. If they had these a lot early in the war, we would have had a lot more problems. Fire in the hole.